North Africa, with its western border bending around the Atlantic Ocean, and its terrain blanketed in vast, mostly empty desert, the continent's lone remaining colony is stuck somewhere between conflict and resolution, independence and occupation. In 1975, Western Sahara, a territory about the size of New Zealand, was promised by Spain, its former colonial ruler, that it would be able to choose its own destiny through a referendum on self-determination. But the territory was invaded by Morocco that same year, and a war erupted between Morocco and the Polisario Front, which is the liberation movement that represents Western Saharan natives, called Sahrawis. The UN brokered a ceasefire in 1991, putting the referendum plan back on the table. But the referendum still hasn't happened, leaving the pro-independent Sahrawis dissatisfied, angry, feeling marginalized.
لا اجتمعنا اليوم احنا كصحراويين اجتمعنا درنا جمع مثلا على انه نضالي هكذا هي اعمالنا اليوميه كمناضلين نعمل تحت الاحتلال المغربي. هي مثلا على انها تنسيقيه غديم إيزيك هي تعمل منذ 3 سنوات من عقب تفكيك مخيم غديم إيزيك. نعمل على اعمالنا اليوميه النضاليه اللي هي مثلا على انها محاطه بكل السريه نظرا للاستعمار المغربي للغزاة المغربيه اللي تابعنا في كل مكان.
The Gdeim Izik platform organizes demonstrations demanding independence. They also protest against human rights violations they say they endure at the hands of the Moroccan government. And they advocate for members of their organization who were imprisoned following the Gdeim Izik protest camp, which started October 10, 2010 and lasted about a month. Scholars, including Noam Chomsky, claim that Gdeim Izik was the true start of the Arab Spring.
أعتقد على أن تجربة غديم إيزيك هي اللي أثرت على العالم العربي على أنه يتبنى هذا الحراك السلمي وحب الصحراوي للسلم وعدم التواجه مع السلطات هو اللي خلاهم يمشوا ب 12 كيلومتر.
Most reports claim Gdeim Izik grew to at least 10,000 people before police shut it down on November 7, 2010. Hundreds of people were arrested, and several people, including protesters and police, were killed. But if this really was the start of the Arab Spring, it begs the question, why didn't it work for the Sahrawis?
هو لأنه مارس عليه القمع اللي مارس في تفكيك غديم إيزيك والحمل اللي شنت عاقبه وما أننا مستعدين على أنه يمرق ياسر من الناس وخلوها تنطحن مثلا أننا مستعدين ما أننا كيف التونسيين ولا المصريين ولا الليبيين ولا اليمنيين اللي يعدوا بالملايين.
Gdeim Izik is one of the blackest story of Sahara problem, but it was very badly managed.
Since Gdeim Izik, protests still spring up from time to time in Laayoune. But many Sahrawis claim they have been denied jobs or have received less pay if they demonstrate for self-determination. They say they are not allowed to protest freely. Aminatou Haider, who has been called the Sahrawi Gandhi and is perhaps the territory's most prominent human rights activist, has been subjected to years of forced disappearance and imprisonment for her non-violent protests.
أنا مثلا كامرأة اللي تجرأت وكنت موظفة وتجرأت للخروج للشارع تم طردي من العمل إلى يومنا هذا.
Inside the territory, there are a number of human rights concerns. Groups like Freedom House or Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International frequently highlight patterns of abuse that are ongoing that involve serious abuses such as torture, arbitrary detainment, and those sorts of things, and down to other sorts of more basic issues of civil, political rights, lack of ability to freely associate, they can't form human rights organizations.
وإحنا متأكدين كيف متأكدين المغاربة على أن الشيء الوحيد اللي خافوا منه وهو ظهور الناس في الشارع، وأنا نذكر على المسؤولين أمنيين من بداية حركنا في 2005 يوقفوا يقولوا لنا شوفوا أبدا ما نخلوا لكم الشارع باش ما تثبتوا على أنك إن هذا كامل نقولوه للكذب.
إذن هذا فيما يخص العلاقة بالانفصاليين سيقدم لكم حججا كثيرة وسيتكلمون عن حقوق الإنسان، ولكن أقول لكم إننا لم نمنع الإنسان من الدراسة ولا من حرية التعبير ولا من حرية العمل ولا من حرية المستشفيات إذا صارت، ويكونوا في وقفة محدودة، وعندما يأتوا ناس الأمن يرجموهم الشباب بالحجارة.
The protests we see, whether it's on YouTube or through other social media, is often led by very young Sahrawis who've grown up under Moroccan occupation over the past 30 years. They view independence for Western Sahara as the only way in which they can achieve some semblance of dignity in their daily lives. And so, on the one hand, it's clearly a failure of Morocco's policies in Western Sahara. On the other hand, it shows that Western Sahara nationalism as a phenomenon is alive and well.
The day after our delegation of 6 journalists arrived on a fellowship with the International Women's Media Foundation, one of the largest protests in recent years broke out in Lyon, drawing over 1,000 people. Protesters hold up what look like peace signs, but this symbol means free Western Sahara to them. This protest was partially due to the UN's recent decision to reject a proposal to add a human rights monitoring mandate to their peacekeeping mission there. Parties from both sides also made it clear that our presence was one of the catalysts for this demonstration.
إذن حتى غياب الصحافة بتواجدها دائما هون عاطي مولي فرصة للمغرب على إنه يعدل اللي يبغاه.
وجد سعيدة أيضا لأن هذه الجماهير المقموعة استطاعت على الأقل اليوم أن تخرج يعني من جعبتها هذا الكبت، هذا القمع، هذا القهر اللي كان ممارس عليها خلال 38 سنة، واستطاعت الخروج إلى الشارع بأعلام صحراوية مطالبة في مسيرة كبيرة بالاستقلال الوطني.
As Haider was telling us that she is afraid for her own safety following this demonstration.
Get inside! Get inside! Get inside!
Rocks began to pelt the house we were in.
Okay, get down, everybody.
Eventually, we were able to get out safely, and on our way out, we noticed how Haider's car had been vandalized.
Police don't know how to deal with the population. They don't understand that these people have their right to say they want separatism or they want union. They don't get training how to deal with the population in conflict zones.
It's estimated that there are about 250,000 Sahrawis, either in Western Sahara, in refugee camps in Algeria, or elsewhere. And regardless of how protests are handled, Morocco argues that, given their small population, Sahrawis would be unable to successfully sustain an independent nation on their own.
Should know one thing. Morocco has done a lot in terms of infrastructure, in development, in terms of preparing the education, access to services, electricity, water. All these things was not in the past.
And some fear that if its Moroccan occupiers leave Western Sahara, the territory could become unstable and unable to protect its borders.
Because this region is very secured. There is no Al-Qaeda in Sahara. There is no terrorism in Western Sahara. If we don't keep this region secured, all North Africa will be a bomb to be exploded anytime.
Whether an independent Sahrawi state could be viable is a question that will not likely be answered anytime soon. The conflict is largely ignored by the international community. As one international official familiar with the conflict said, for international action to be taken, they have to be put on the radar screen. This is not a hotspot.
Conflicts like this, where the big boys are involved, the big boys being the permanent 5 members of the Security Council, can be incredibly difficult to resolve. So while there's an overwhelming international consensus that Western Sahara is owed some act of self-determination, whether that's a referendum on independence or something that could confirm a final status agreement. There's no will from the Security Council to really push this conflict in any direction that would otherwise upset what is a real kind of delicate balance of interests.
معروف على أنه الدولة المغربية دولة محتلة بطريقة غير شرعية إقليم الصحراء الغربية. مفهوم على أن شعب الصحراء الغربية له كامل الحق في تقرير مصيره، ولا تطبق قرارات مجلس الأمن الدولي لأنه فيه تغليب مصالح دولية لصالح الدولة المغربية على يعني حساب معاناة الشعب الصحراوي.